Odhiambo Akum is a public policy and fiscal decentralization expert. He joins us this morning. We are going to talk about our debt. We have a debt crisis in the country. We are going to have a new election where we'll have new leadership taking over from the State House to the Houses of Parliament to the counties. How are we going to manage our finances going forward? We also know that there are several proposals before Parliament that are quite crucial. We'll be discussing them. Odhiambo, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you very much for having me around as well.
This is the hot seat. Normally, the hot seat is where Wanjiro is sitting, but you can see what she's doing.
We've traded places.
She's being imperialistic.
Karibu sana, Victor. Share the heat.
I hope the seat won't be too hot.
Share the heat.
Thank you.
So, Odhiambo, public policy and fiscal decentralization expert.
Yes.
What's that?
Well, let me start by first indicating the fact that professionally I'm a lawyer, but I'm a lawyer who's got interest in matters to do with public policy, fiscal decentralization. Fiscal decentralization is just basically how you arrange the financial affairs of the state, or how the financial affairs of the state are related. Public policy is all about, public power, its exercise, and things like that. And so we are more interested on how that works out and the kind of things that need to be done to ensure that it works out in a manner that is beneficial, largely to the interest of the society and things like that.
Okay.
Yes.
Understood.
And Victor started, well, at least we met. I don't know that you started, but
on,
you started.
on this show, he's Odhiambo.
Yeah, sorry. I apologize. Yes, Odhiambo. Let me catch up.
Yes.
Obviously comes you're one of the pioneers, or would I say the forerunners, having worked in the CIC at a time when the country was grappling with this animal called devolution. You sat with Kamodo, under Commissioner Kamodo Waiganjo then, on the PFM. Were you
Thematic area.
Thematic area.
Yes.
And these are the guys who are advising and monitoring, issuing press alerts and press statements, drafting laws. So really at the heart of it.
Yes.
So in your view, how are we doing? Because this is how many years on?
Wow.
Yeah. How are we doing on
Well,
PFM matters?
on PFM
Have we
matters-
moved forward, backwards? Has the big corruption, county corruption? Public finance management. So there was a thematic area on public finance. There were several thematics.
Yes.
One of the big ones was public finance that crafted first two laws that were then merged into one big law that governs our public finance management and is supposed to make our monies accountable and effective. How are we doing?
Well, I wouldn't exactly say that we are doing too well, but we are doing better than we used to do back in the day. One of the greatest successes of fiscal decentralization or devolution, the practice of devolution in the country, is the fact that, number one, we are actually implementing devolution as anticipated under the constitutional framework that we adopted in 2010. Unfortunately, that has also come with its challenges. Some of those challenges were witnessed prior to the onset of devolution. The other thing is that, and for which we might not have an agreement about, but the thing is that rather than just practice the kind of sleaze that was being witnessed at the national level, we've also had the opportunity to decentralize or devolve sleaze to the extent that if you go by quite a number of reports that emanate from entities that are entrusted with the responsibility of giving such reports, like the Auditor General, periodically some of those are expressed by the Control of Budget. You can actually see that some of the bad manners that we used to have during the time that we had what was it called, local governments, and of course central government. Some of those bad manners have actually been decentralized. But overall speaking, from an overall perspective, yes, we are doing well, but not doing too well.
What are these things? If you were to give an example and show, this is how we were managing our public finances before devolution and after devolution, and after even the enactment of the PFM Act, this is how better we're managing our public finances?
One of the things is that, we have a very robust law on public finance management. That one is a plus. If you look at the manner in which we were managing our finances, I mean, there were quite a number of legislations. Some of them were very basic. They never provided with greater insight on, on issues relating to the management of public finances, including accountability, and oversight and things like that. So the Public Finance Management Act by itself is already a very great step in terms of detailing what we are supposed to do, how we are supposed to do it, and in any event, who is supposed to do what, how they're supposed to do whatever it is that they're supposed to do, and things like that. But unfortunately, the mere fact that we have the law that has not also prevented those who are keen on, perpetuating the bad manners that was there before from continuing those practices. Yeah.
Who are the custodians of this act? I think now, looking at that and saying, now, it coming into law, as you've said, there are certain things then that are supposed to be done. There are certain requirements, guidelines, standards that are supposed to be kept. So then the responsibility then lies on certain shoulders to make sure that these things are done in a certain way. Whose responsibility is this?
Well, there are quite a number of bodies that are entrusted with various responsibilities under the Public Finance Management Act. It's not like, for instance, the Penal Code, where you would say the police and the judiciary and all those other organs of state have got the responsibility of ensuring that in the event that you've run afoul of the law, then as a matter of fact, we come in and arrest you and things like that. But when it comes to the Public Finance Management Act, there are quite a number of organs that have been entrusted with quite a number of responsibilities. Like, for instance, at the national level, we've got the National Assembly, we've got the Senate, we've got the Control of Budget, we've got the Auditor General, we have quite a number of entities.
Treasury.
Yes, okay. Treasury itself, which is of course also bound by that particular act. But then, and Shiro can attest to this, you get to realize that some of them also are not really, either there are instances, or rather there are instances where they have really committed to the provisions of the act, but then there are also instances that they've run afoul of the act itself. So it all depends on the issue at hand, because if, say, for instance, you've not been able to manage, to do your financial statements as it's supposed to be done, if it's at the county level, for instance, the county assemblies have got a role in that. Okay. And if you say a CEC, for instance, is supposed to be censured and stuff like that, if it's at the national level, the same would also apply.
Right.
Yeah. So there are quite a number of levels of responsibilities and entities that are charged with such kind of responsibilities in the event that there are people or there are institutions who have not necessarily done what they're supposed to do.
But Victor, can we argue that the CS Treasury?
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
She knows.
We've engaged
we've engaged over the years.
Yes, but thank you for the reminder. It's very important.
I
also changed my name and I went through that for a while. So Odhiambo, is it not true that the CS Treasury, who's been charged with the responsibility of ensuring the enforcement of the PFM Act broadly, given extensive powers, including powers of sanction, powers to withhold funds and all of that, could you not say that that office is one of the primary points of responsibility? The next being then Parliament that comes in to censure. Could you then not say that those are the two? And where things have gone awry, is that not where we should start to look?
And control of budget?
Control of budget, yes, to an extent, because she needs to approve expenditures. Yes. So
Okay.
yes, agreed. So if she approves expenditures that are
Yeah, I think for the control of budget, if my recollection of, I think, is it 91 or 92 of the PFM Act, she acts on the basis of, is it recommendations or instructions or something like that? But I would have to confirm that.
Okay.
Yeah. But the CS National Treasury, you know, the National Treasury, if you look at, is it section 12 or 14 of the Public Finance Management Act, there's quite an array of responsibilities that are assigned to that particular office. And those responsibilities are quite significant in nature, to the extent that, you know, for instance, if you're being cited for misbehaving, you know, for not exactly running your financial affairs in accordance with the law, then the CS Treasury has got the responsibility to even withdraw funds. You know, withdraw those funds, but of course give reasons as to why there has been those withdrawals. So yes, like Shiro argues, that office or that institution by itself.
She's Wanjiru.
Oh, okay.
It's okay. They're both my names. No, ignore
it's
him.
just the way she calls me Victor. I've always been calling her Shiro.
Now that we are correcting her.
He uses
all
Shiro.
right, so
They use Shiro. He's just Eric is just doing what he does. He's the provocateur.
The sword
Okay.
cuts both sides.
Both sides. So I'll remember to address her as Wanjiru.
Yes.
Yeah. So like it is, the National Treasury has got quite a responsibility in the management of our financial affairs, as assigned by law, and of course in terms of just their general mandate. I mean, I don't expect that in the absence of the Public Finance Management Act, then they will do anything other than managing our public finances as is expected. Yes.
But there's something that I've always found a little disturbing. Huh? When we have these discussions, we seem to be discussing a lot of these matters with reference to the national government. Because we're talking about treasury, the understanding of these things, the overarching laws and the constitution. But then, devolution is at the heart of how we do our things right now. Now, my concern is, do our counties have the requisite manpower, human resource, to be able to, A, understand these things that we're talking about, implement them, and even more importantly, do those who are charged with lawmaking in the counties, do they have the requisite capacity to actually ensure that there are laws that will make it possible for these things that we're talking about here to actually become a reality in the counties?
You're asking whether MCAs know this law, understand this law, have the capacity?
They may even understand it. Do they have the capacity to ensure that there are lawmaking body as well, that they actually ensure that these things that we're talking about actually see the light of day within the counties?
They play the oversight role.
Yes.
You know, my sense with that question, or maybe we should hear from Victor first, because I'm like, you're missing the point, because when we talk about corruption and misappropriation and kleptocracy, it's not a capacity issue, it's a culture issue.
Actually, it is a capacity issue in Wanjiru.
I think it's a culture issue, and I think we have a very competent public service at the national level. At the county level, some of those public service whatever could be very political and compromised, I agree. But if you look, for instance, at the Auditor General report, there are counties like Makueni, there are some counties that have very high compliance. In fact, unqualified audits by
Is there another county we can mention beyond Makueni?
I'm trying to remember which others had unqualified audits by the Auditor General. So there is high compliance. Even if you look at the control of budget reports, there are at least maybe half counties that are ranking somewhere in terms of compliance. So those that don't have good compliance, those that are stealing money, those that aren't complying, have poor leadership. And that poor leadership is intent on manipulating the system for private gain. So corruption is not a capacity issue, it's a culture issue. That's my argument.
Oddly, what do you think?
Well, for me, this is it. I have even friends who work in those counties. I might not be in a position to doubt their capacity to do the job. Okay, I mean, we have counties, and you realize that there has been quite a shift in in human resource, and manpower. People have actually taken up jobs in those counties. The only problem is this: are they being given the opportunity to do that which they're supposed to do, or are they just fitting into a system and doing that which either they found being done, or they have got nothing to do other than fit in and just continue with what is happening?
Do you see mass resignations from counties, from these very competent people that you and Wanjiru are talking about, when they protest that they aren't being given the opportunity
to do what
and yet,
they're qualified to
they have
do?
the capacity?
Why would
They
they
don't
do
resign.
that?
So it's a
don't
culture
resign.
issue then.
Who resigns at national level? What is
No one resigns.
CT?
So they
Hilarious.
have the qualifications,
Yes.
the competence. They have done it elsewhere, but when they get in here, they basically
Which
show-
means
they
they
show-
are actually not as competent as you think.
Isn't that a Kenyan problem? Which professionals? Dr. Wandia Njoya says this: lack of professional integrity among the professional class is our key problem. They don't resign at national level
That's
either.
what you call incompetence. You see, competence is not a question of having certain academic qualifications, on having worked.
our experience.
No,
on-the-job
it's not that. Or
experience.
having worked in a system which you really don't have much option other than to do what is required of you. The wild, wild west of the national government and the county governments, where you are surrounded with issues that are not only real, but they go against the very grain of what it is that you're supposed to do. That's the real test of your capacity. Now, if it overwhelms you, then you don't have the capacity.
Oh, I call it culture.
Really?
Culture. I mean,
I'm not sure about that, though I would have to
This is taking it
respect.
into semantics here. But then the question, the other part of CT's question, are the county assemblies adequately resourced, even in terms of understanding the law and the implications of the law, for them to be able to play that oversight role sufficiently?
Well, generally, if I'm to give a scorecard, the county assemblies have not really risen to the occasion. They've not really been able to hold, the executive side of the county governments accountable to the extent of really wanting questions and, really asking questions or, getting answers on some of the things that have happened at the county level insofar as oversight is concerned. They are not any different from, say, the National Assembly.
Can I ask why?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Because here we are talking about assemblies across board,
Yes.
who have not lived up to their responsibility. Why? If you go for a review of your in private sector, if you go for what we call appraisals,
Yes.
after a certain period of time, you're asked questions. How did you fare here, 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 and here? And you say what you feel you've done. Your immediate supervisor says what they feel you've done, and you're asked to give reasons as to why you may have done poorly here or well here. Why do you think they have not lived up to this particular standard? And because we're talking because we can gloss over issues and say, oh, well, they didn't do really well, and okay, let's wait for the next. But then we're going to have the same thing fitting into the same. So why is this not happening?
Simply because of rent seeking. Yeah, it's rent seeking. The truth of the matter is that even for the questions, I'll tell you from a very personal standpoint, I've been able to petition, a county assembly on the basis of Auditor General report in the year 2014, right? But if you look at the manner in which the whole thing was undertaken, you clearly get to see that it was not even meant to achieve a purpose in the first place. But there we were, going there every day, driving from Nairobi to say almost every other week, end of the week, because that is when we were having those meetings with the assembly.
how did the process work? So you petitioned based on the Auditor General report.
We petitioned based on some of the significant issues that had been raised by the Auditor General, and some of those things included the fact that...
Who did you petition?
The county assembly, the county assembly for that matter. And in any event, we also CC'd the Senate. The Senate told us, hey, we don't have jurisdiction on that, but well, we were fine, so let's go to the assembly. And we never really made any it never really made any meaning.
How do you petition the institution that is culpable?
Because
Why
it's-
would they? Why would they let you get through? It is in their interest to frustrate you.
But the standing orders actually allow us to do that. So we petition on the basis of standing orders because they say if you really want,
If you have an issue with the
you want to move the
assembly.
county assembly, then and for them to consider,
Now
you know,
see-
the issue.
Now you see right there, what Mr. Diambo has just described is what I call competence. Forget the roadblocks and forget the walls that are created. You know exactly what you're supposed to do. You do it. Okay? Fine. And you follow. You go to the Senate, they can do what they like. You say, fine, we've heard what you're saying, but we're still pursuing it. When you know that the measure of what you're supposed to do is supposed to be success, and success isn't achieved, unfortunately, you may not think so, but you're incompetent.
I'll ask about the motivating factor. And I'll come back to what Ndu was actually talking about.
Yes.
Appraisals. So we are in that process of doing the appraisals right now, ahead of August, right?
Yes.
If your manager does not understand what you're supposed to be doing,
Yeah.
and then they come and appraise you,
But you know something? Citizens actually fire these guys all the time. The turnover rate of our MPs and
Yes.
MCAs is extremely high.
Yes.
The problem is we then go and
The-
hire
the
equally
issue-
or even more
which comes
incompetent.
back to if the manager does not understand if the manager is going to fire you because
You didn't build a road, and that was not your job.
unaniongelesha vibaya.
It was not your job to do that in the first
You
place.
didn't get my son a job.
You unaniongelesha vibaya. If they don't understand, you know, how
Yes.
have you managed
you
our
don't,
finances?
You don't talk. Yeah, you don't talk to us.
Let's take a break. It's 7:30. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room. Eric Latif, Nduoko, CT Muga. We have two guests in the studio, Wanjiro Gikonyo of the Institute for Social Accountability and a public policy and fiscal decentralization expert, Odhiambo Akwom. We also have two other guests, Shiro and Victor.
The studio is full this
This is a
morning.
full studio. We'll be back shortly. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room.
We're talking about the state of our public finance management as we head into the next general election. We know we've been talking about debt. By last count, what was our national debt at? 7, 8, 10, 9
Nine.
trillion.
It's almost 9 trillion.
9 trillion.
Officially on the books. Unofficially could be somewhere like 11 because there are debts that aren't known.
Undisclosed.
There are some debts that are somewhere there and that we don't know where they are.
They haven't been
Okay.
compiled yet. Yes.
Legally, there's a ceiling
Yes.
to the debt, and this is after National Assembly approved the raising of the ceiling. It's at 9 trillion.
It's the 9 trillion.
9 trillion is our ceiling.
That is the ceiling. as of
Okay.
now. Yes.
And we could have passed that ceiling by,
Well,
creative,
Few hundred shillings.
creative accounting. Now, there's an attempt in the National Assembly now to change how we are dealing with the ceiling.
yes.
And this is a proposal to amend the Public Finance Management Act.
Yes.
Tell us about it, Odhiambo.
Well, it has been proposed by the National Treasury to move away from, classifying debt on having nominal figures for purposes of, setting the debt limit. Like for instance, when I talk of absolute value, our debt is set on, our debt ceiling at the moment has been set at an absolute value of 9 trillion Kenya shillings. But then the National Treasury has sponsored an amendment to the Public Finance Management Act, and generally what they're trying to say is that we should peg debt at a figure that is not more than 55% of the GDP, that is the gross domestic product. Yes, so that is the amendment that has been proposed. Though
55% of GDP.
of the GDP.
What's our GDP currently?
Well, our GDP could be about what, 10 trillion?
As per President Uhuru Kenyatta's personal declaration, it's what? Is it 11 or 13 trillion?
Well,
Yeah,
they
but-
say
He
13
says
trillion.
he inherited 3 or 4, he is leaving us 13. So 55% of that would be
well,
less than 7 trillion.
Yeah.
yes.
So this amendment, if we were to pass, what would happen?
Our debt shrinks like before our eyes. It goes,
already as it stands at the moment, the debt actually stands at between 72 to 79% of the GDP. Yeah. So even with a lower, the proposal of a lower value, I don't know how are we going to manage the fact that we're already at 72%. So you're proposing a value that is lower than where you are at the moment. But then again, having interacted with some of these treasury mandarins, at some point in time, I used to represent the interest of the county governments at the Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council. That it was all the way up to 2015. So the issue of GDP, its calculations and things like that, it has been the bastion of, creative accounting. Very creative. And Treasury used to, when those back then, we used to clamor for increased funding to the county governments, a lot more money. Considering the fact that in the first financial year, counties only received about 190 billion plus 20 to make it about 210 or thereabouts. So, that constant clamor to have more money released to the county governments, the Treasury would always tell us, yes, we still have wiggle room. We will make more, we will give more to the counties, but then when you ask, are we able to afford this? They will tell you, yes, we are able to afford this because as it stands, we only have, the debt stands at 48% to the GDP. Then the next thing, it's 52%, 55%. Now we are at probably 79% because the range, based on the material that I've seen, it ranges between 72 to 79%. But then again, also, if I'm to, second guess the National Treasury, I know that there's a possibility that we might be rebasing our economy next year.
Again.
Yeah, because the last rebasing was done in 2014. And if you go back into history, the rebasing of the economy has always taken 9 year to 10 years interval. We first did it in 57, then I think 67, 76, 85. Then after 85, we did it in 2005, and the last one being 2014. So in the possibly likely event that we rebase our economy, then that might be one of the influencing factors.
Could bring our current debt to about 25% of GDP. So we have
we
some
don't
extra
have a debt
30%.
problem.
It is not, I'm just second guessing them, but it could be.
No, I think that is the only logical explanation to this.
Yeah,
that's the handshake.
The only way that the National Treasury would go in and say, you know what, forget this 9 trillion number. Let's say 55%. Knowing full well that currently you are at 76%. So it's obvious because this GDP figure, we shall come back with another conversation.
Not only that.
And we are the ones who tell you what our GDP is.
Exactly.
Not only that. Now I understand why these amendments then say that in the event there is a breach of the debt
ceiling.
They have this wording because they want to remove the ceiling.
Yes.
They want to put the percentage. In the event that there is a breach, then the CS shall provide a memorandum explaining the reasons and the circumstances why there is a breach. So not only
So the CS shall not even be requesting Parliament for approval to breach. The PS shall be
all
reporting
they do is just
after.
to report the reasons
After the
as to
fact.
why there was one.
they want
After
to
the fact.
delete what you call those hard. There are some hard rules. There are some
budget constraints.
hard budget constraints
yeah.
that have been written into the PFM because the writers of these laws, these guys, knew our culture.
But
and
if you
said,
ask me, all they're doing is putting in black and white what they've been practicing over the last longest period of time.
agreed.
It's been happening in this manner.
Well,
Anyway, all that's happening now is that it's going to be established in
They
law.
want to remove the lawyers
You
from
know,
this whole story because lawyers
so that
wrote
they will
this
not be
thing
asked the
hard.
difficult
Yes.
questions or the roadblocks will not be put in there.
Exactly what you're saying, the last bit.
Yeah.
Because you see, if they might be doing it, okay, but there's the opportunity to ask very difficult questions in the event that you're able to see that they're doing it. Okay, but the moment you do away with those opportunities to ask difficult questions, then you get into a comfort zone and you get to do it anyway.
In
But-
fact,
yeah.
our whole petition, because we have a
Yes.
petition
Yes.
calling for the impeachment of the CS because of violating those very rules.
Yes.
So when you look there and say, this is somebody who's been cited in the Auditor General report, is then proposing amendments that you may argue there is a conflict of interests because once you're cited, your department, it's not the CS that's cited, it's the Treasury,
Yeah, the institution.
the institution
Yes.
in debt management for violations. So by removing these very rules that are the basis of the Auditor General now citing abuse, what are you saying? You're seeing one, there's a a holder of an office actually lowering the transparency requirements of that office through proposed legal trying to lower the accountability requirements. So no,
because it doesn't seem like it would be.
Keep the standard here. Even if they don't comply, you can go to court.
Exactly. I mean, the law will provide you the opportunity to go to court.
Or the incoming government can decide to impeach if they have, if they are that way.
So this, it brings back to that question about competency then. The people who are currently in the National Treasury know that with the change of government, they are likely going to move out of the National Treasury. The people who are currently running the executive know for sure that they are not going to be the head of the executive after the next election. So why would they be bringing this amendment now if the so-called mandarins in the National Treasury are not behind it? Because those are the ones who are going to be constant.
You know, Eric, the thing is that we have a problem, and our problem is a debt problem. I mean, we can't run away from that fact. So the question is this: are we working towards solutions in terms of coming up with, reasonable measures to manage debt? I mean, you read the BPS, the budget policy statement. You see the Treasury saying we need to commit to, rationalizing expenses, cutting off expenses from, non-priority areas and things like that. But then again, you also get to read from the same document, them telling you that it might be difficult to achieve the same. All right. So you also look at the Division of Revenue Bill. Already within the Division of Revenue Bill, you can clearly see that in terms of the revenue projections they are in, we are committing 930 billion towards public debt servicing for the in this financial year. All right. You also look at it, you look at the BPS. The BPS is indicative of the fact that in terms of our budget deficit, we have a budget deficit of 846 billion. And the only in terms of figures as reported, and I'm hoping they are correct or accurate, you also realize that in terms of wiggle room, in terms of the 9 trillion, ceiling, we only have about 400 billion to go. The moment in terms of space, that 9 trillion can only accommodate 400 billion. But our budget deficit is 846. So the moment you take in or factor in that deficit of 846 billion into the budget, then already you exceed.
We have exceeded the ceiling.
You exceed, So even the recommendation by the parliamentary committee was that you must find ways in which you reduce the figure from 846 to 400 billion, because that lies within the allowable limit. So that, to be in a nutshell, epitomizes the fact that we indeed do have a problem.
In other words, we've been overspending.
Exactly.
And we've been spending on projects whose returns are not ascertained. So in terms of you put money, too much money, too quickly, but is the money going to come back? Some of them, like the SGR, continue to make losses. In fact, there's a story in today's paper. The Chinese have even handed it back to the Kenya government. They said, you're not making money, but we still have to pay that amount. And there are lots of other projects like that don't give the returns. We are overspending. Then the other part of that, which the Parliamentary Budget Office has said, is that we've had constant budget overruns. So we say this is what we are going to do, and we wind up exceeding. We actually have been borrowing more every year than we say we will borrow. So breaching, that's why we breached the ceiling. So instead of strengthening accountability, these amendments propose to weaken accountability. Also, once you move to a percentage figure, you're losing some of the detail that you need to measure debt. So even the transparency of how we measure debt, they're actually saying, listen, guys, this thing is really difficult and it's very complicated. So let's make the rules easier.
Easy for us, yeah.
Instead of trying to comply, they want to reduce the threshold of the law. So, in fact, this bill it's not even a bill, it's a policy. It is a bill, but it's on the Treasury side. It hasn't reached to Parliament. If Parliament enacts this, now that will be a scandal.
What's the likelihood of Parliament enacting this?
We had a conversation with some experts who are saying not a Not a chance.
Not a chance. Okay.
But I think as the public, we need to let our voice out and say, we know what you're trying to do, and we do not condone it.
Is there any country in the world that has put into practice what we're discussing here?
Well, from the way I know it, going by the literature that I've seen around such, you can actually use GDP for purposes of the same things that you're talking about, and the IMF, I think, recommends 40%, not more than 40%. Okay. But, we are looking at our Kenyan reality. So we're coming home. And when we come home, and you look at what has been happening in this country, because at one point in time we were going the GDP way, now we went into the absolute or nominal figure way, now we want to go back to the GDP way. But for me, I will not, if you ask me for my personal opinion, I'm not in support of going back to this 55% direction. But like, sorry.
You see why I'm asking this question is because we have countries whose deficit is beyond 100% of their GDP. Okay, so what other indicators are used in determining this? Because we seem to be discussing percentage. Our discussion is focused on two perimeters. And I'm saying the other people who seem to not even, should we say, comply with what we are discussing here, and they don't seem to be doing badly as a result of it. So what is it that they know and what is it that they do that we don't do?
Like a country like Japan, for instance.
Yeah, they're the ones that-
Japan.
Big example.
Yeah, Japan is the biggest example, going by what you're saying. But you see, for them, they produce,
And who do they borrow from, by the way?
Japan,
Themselves.
they can borrow from themselves.
Precisely.
Yes.
And long term.
Precisely.
Yes.
And then
The government of
accountability
Japan borrows from the people of Japan.
and then
Yes.
accountability in where the money goes.
And all of that.
Do you
Because of
see?
also properly negotiated rates.
Exactly.
Properly negotiated
So
rates
essentially-
So our problem
without
is-
any kind of ulterior motive
Their
behind
Our
people
it.
problem
are
is the
partners in their processes.
Exactly.
Okay?
And the
Yeah.
interests protected are those of the people. So these rules protect us. The hard rules that are in the PFM that the CS, that the Treasury seeks to remove, protect us. The absolute measure that helps us to say it is 9 trillion as opposed to a percentage of GDP where you can massage those numbers and grow the GDP so the percent goes down, which is what this government did.
You see, who's blowing the whistle here? Is it people in government or people like yourselves?
It's us.
It's us.
Right. So these friends of yours who are in government whom you've been telling me are competent.
Beware of
Then you think they're competent.
CT must win
No,
his
it's-
argument.
The thing is this, we have
I'm
a problem.
defeated.
In Kenya, we have a problem. We have to accept the fact that we have a problem. Because you see, even with the rebasing of the economy in 2014, one of the effects of the rebasing is the fact that Kenya moved from what it used to be a low-income country to, is it a middle
lower middle
That is a
income.
con.
Yeah. So when we
That,
moved...
no. That is a con. We are a low-income country.
No, that's the
No, but
magic
no,
of numbers.
but that-
Hello,
No,
prove it.
it doesn't matter
it.
what one
Bring
did.
your
Wait,
statistics.
Vertical ground, low income.
Yes.
It's
But
low
on
in-
paper,
It is
Yes.
a lower
Bring
middle
your
income country.
statistics.
Middle income.
yes.
This country.
Lower middle income.
Next time will be even higher. Watch this space.
You wait.
Yeah, if we rebase the economy again, and because you see, even with the rebasing of the economy in 2014,
You're in
it
the
is
wrong
stated that
profession.
We are joining
you should
G7.
be cooking numbers.
By 2025, Kenya is G7.
We even have a express highway, super highway.
We'll
Why
be
should
sitting
they
on the
treat it?
table there with the other seven.
in 2014, they say the economy grew by 25% after rebasing. Yeah, that is
On
why.
paper.
You better believe it.
Yeah, that is what they said.
In which year?
In 2014, that's when we
Where
rebased.
were you?
On the
That
year
was
of
here.
rebasing.
Yeah,
I
and
was
for the
there.
fact that it grew by, they say it grew by 25%, then it also means that Kenya can no longer attract those concessional loans. Okay, now we can only attract commercial loans, and things like
It was
that.
by magic.
Same year
Uhuru
we
Kenyatta
procured
inherited.
SDR. Same year we procured the
That's the
dumps.
direction I wanted
I
to
think
go.
we even procured Eurobond. Where?
In fact, going
We are big.
Wanjiru.
You don't know.
It is the same year
Where have
that
you
we
been?
also amended Section 50 of the PFM Management Act to allow for government-to-government procurement.
It was
2014.
amended.
Yeah.
SGR,
Yeah, and
SGR
then-
was enabled by an amendment.
Exactly.
Yay,
So, in
And who are the
2014,
clever people who brought this about?
competent people
Kleptonomics.
in
well,
the
the
public
people who are able to sit down and look at it and be like, we want to do the SGR, we want to do the Eurobond, we want to do all these other things.
Where
And-
was CIC? Why did you let this happen? Now we can ask you.
No, I will tell you. In 2014, I wish I can get that memorandum. We actually protested. We were against that amendment to the PFM Act. And it was the only one time in the history of this country, after the formulation of the PFM Management Act, that we saw the PFM being amended without any controversy. I mean, everything had been laid out, and it's like
Even
Parliament was just
Parliament.
steamrolled into amending that section.
You know, why do people keep saying Parliament is...
Kleptocracy.
Parliament isn't steamrolled.
Kleptocracy
No.
is about personal, private interest.
Parliament are willing participants
Using
in this
public
whole
money.
process.
Definitely they
Yes.
are.
They're not steamrolled.
Well,
These are grown-up people who are, by your definition,
competent.
very competent.
They are very competent
very
kleptocrats.
They
are-
understand this
till
thing.
They are a competent part of this machinery.
What, as we head into the next election and we are looking at all these things, we have a new government coming in. What's
How
our
does
way
it
out?
look?
What's our way out?
yeah, well,
Can I suggest
Can we get out
one
alive?
view? Can I suggest one view?
Yes.
The CS was due to run for elective office in Marsabit. Did not, because he was imposed upon to continue holding the helm due to the good work he's doing. And indeed, there have been some small improvements. Auditor General reports are showing some improvements.
Yes.
But if the handshake government is saying this is our guy, and the CS is then bringing these kind of amendments to the floor, what we can say without a doubt is we are going to get more of the same. We can say that without. Kleptonomics will continue.
But let me ask you this.
If Raila
question,
wins, you
Wanjiru.
said there is continuity.
Bas.
But Wanjiru, let me ask you this
More
question.
of the same.
Let me ask this question. Is there no other side to this particular story other than the dismal picture that we keep painting? Because even as I say this tongue in cheek, I am aware that our civil service has some of the most educated, some of the most well-informed, almost competent people you can actually come across. Okay? There's no question about it. Now, are you telling me that all these people are walking along this path that we're calling disastrous, and they don't know that it's disastrous, and that there isn't any other story we can say regarding this that may actually shed a positive light into the whole story? That is all negative, really.
Well, city as it is at the moment, the thing is that we're in a debt rut. We are caught in a debt situation. All these things that are being done are just for purposes. I mean, even if I'm to infuse good faith into this, okay, it is all done for the sake of wanting to get us or wanting to alleviate the debt problem that we are in to some extent. Because as it is now, the budget that we have, we cannot basically implement it without borrowing. Okay, and unfortunately, we are borrowing to the extent that some of the monies that we are borrowing is even being used for recurrent expenditure. As unfortunate as it is, it's in violation of the law. But if you are to go really deep into the books, you can clearly see, even for the Eurobond, at some point in time, when the former CS was put to task to explain where the monies went, he was not able to explain 47 billion that he was claiming had been given to the Ministry, or is it of Planning, or is it and something like that. So clearly, if the 47 billion was given to Ministry of Planning, where did it go? Any capital project that they did? None. But it could have gone.
Planning.
It's planning. It went into planning. But
Well, let's say it went into planning, but is
Planning
that a capital
And
good?
for who?
Yeah.
Planning for what and for who?
Odhiambo, thank you
Yes.
very much for joining us. Odhiambo Akwom is a public policy and fiscal decentralization expert. We've been talking about our debt situation as we think about the next government that we're going to elect, from members of the county assembly to members of the National Assembly and the Senate, and then the executives. Please, let's bear in mind, we need to have people who actually understand the job and the laws that they're coming to work with. Asante sana Odhiambo.
Asante sana.
We'll give you Ciplodon. Tumekupatia headache.